complete from the thank you. Okay, we are back in action. It's 10:30. We're gonna spend some time on sections 1 through 3 on our miscellaneous ag bill. This is the language about farmers to get restricted by local zoning. We're spending a lot of time on this bill, on this section of it. We're gonna have Steve Collier, General Counsel for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and Abby Willard, Director, Agriculture Development Division, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. We are going to go down through our language. We have Bradley Showman, our attorney, tomorrow coming in. We're trying to put some finishing touches on where we stand. I don't know exactly where we are just quite yet. We have the language in front of us. The committee will listen today and listen tomorrow and make a determination of where they want to be. So as it stands right now, would like to lead up.
I would, if that's okay.
Yep. Welcome. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning. Good morning to you all. Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. So I really appreciate all the time you're taking on this issue. I know it's kind of a lot of spiraling over actually some kind of small differences. And so what we are hoping to do is really just have a conversation with you all of where you think this should go. Because we've been grappling with it for a long time, and I've talked to all the stakeholders who've come forward so far, and really, we're trying to find the compromise that serves everyone's interests, was our proposal. I continue to believe the differences between the Farm Coalition, the League, and us are pretty small, but they're still important, and particularly important to some folks. So I would like to answer whatever questions you may have, but also just kind of go through again a little bit like why we are where we are.
Yep.
If that's okay.
That is exactly, if we could just start from the top, and as we go, we'll interrupt and go and talk and flesh things out. And again, I tend to agree with you. I think, talking with the committee, in the conversations, no formal discussions about really nailing it down. This is what today we'll do and tomorrow as well. But I don't think that the differences are vast. I think we just have pressures. All of us equally have pressures from outside groups and just trying to find that compromise. As you're very well aware, I think that no matter where we end up today, that farmers win. Let's get into it.
Okay, great. So just to take it from the top, the easiest thing to do would have been to simply restore the exemption as it was. I mean, everyone always thought it was there. The Supreme Court, understandably perhaps, misunderstood the language, and so they ruled in a way that was never intended. Easiest thing would do is say, okay, we're just going to fix that, and you wouldn't have to do much of anything there except restore what was in place. The problem with doing that is no one wants it. None of the stakeholders want to go back to just where it was. So if that's why we're not proposing that was our first kind of thought, let's just fix it. Let's go back right where we were. But nobody wanted that. And I think from our perspective, there were a couple of real reasons why it doesn't. Well, objectively, it wasn't the old status quo wasn't perfect. And so there were some ways to sort of remedy that. Remember, the old standard was you had to have 4 contiguous acres and be farming it. Or you had to be commercially farming, meaning you either had $2,000 on average in agricultural sales every year or a Schedule F. So it only applied to people with 4 acres or commercial farms. That's it. But because of the $2,000 or the Schedule F, the size of that commercial operation could be quite small. And so we always recognized that that was a potential gap in terms of us, regulating a half an acre sheep farm in the middle of downtown. Arguably you could make the $2,000 threshold, but maybe the RAPs that we enforce don't really very well apply to that area. But we were always reluctant to raise the requirements because that means people don't have any protection, and some farms can be really successful on very small parcels of land. So that was one kind of gap, is the $2,000. The other gap was, from our perspective.
So before we get up that $2,000, the committee's heard me ask it. I've yet to find anyone that is affected by the $5,000 versus the 2,000. And I'm sure they're out there, but they just haven't crossed our paths yet, as far as being in this room. And so, not saying it crossed our paths, that's probably unfair, but we haven't seen anybody yet to say, well, that is, really gonna hurt me, as far as jumping to that $5,000.
Yeah.
But I get it, but I also do believe, and I think that Senator Colin Moore and I might have had an offline discussion about it. Something that you said the other day, or I should say that something I've said the other day in this room, that to make it a little bit stricter might get away from some of the people that really aren't farming. They're really not farming. They're raising animals or they're raising pets. Well, they're really, really not farming just quite yet. And I think that's as much protection as there is, along the way, that making it that you guys don't have to go in to defend something that isn't really in the realm of what farming is. So that's just kind of the talk that I have. Anybody else that wants to jump in on that, feel free to put their thoughts on that. But that is one sticking point I think that we're having with the advocates. Should it be 2? Should it be 5? Where's that number? How did we get there? And why? So I just wanted to put it in.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a very good question. And I'm wondering whether, and you may not have data for this, Steve, how many farms would be involved if it was stayed at 5 and how many at 2? In other words, I'm trying to get a picture of the differences between those two numbers.
It's a great question. We don't have any specific data. This is all based on the USDA survey census data, so it's not perfect. It's based on the survey, it's estimates. But still, we think there are about 5,500 farms in Vermont. That threshold is set as $1,000 in sales, so very small threshold. There are a lot of farms that make less than 10 grand a year, as an example, because that was the league wanted to have the $10,000 standard at one time. So I looked at the survey data, and surprisingly, it was something like 50% of farms make less than $10,000. Now, granted, these are all pretty small farms, but there are people who are farming and can be successful. And that's kind of why we pushed back and said, that's too much. Can we go lower? And they agreed to go down to 5,000.
And I think that's a very, very important point that you made as you started out with your comments at the beginning, that the stakeholders, they knew what they wanted and they knew what they didn't want. And this is already a compromise that's been made with one of the larger stakeholders now have a say. And are they going to be upset if we don't stick to that 5 and then drop to 2? Are we going to lose them elsewhere?
That's a great question. And so the way that our proposal is designed, I do not think the difference between 2,000 and 5,000 is important. I don't, because we're dealing with livestock separately, where the issues I think legitimately arose were with livestock, not with other kinds of farming on less than 4 acres. That said, we committed to the league that we would propose $5,000 as a compromise, and we're not moving off that position unless we can reach further agreement with them, which we're still trying to do. We still would love to get the consensus where everybody is right exactly in the same spot. But realistically, I do not think there's very much difference. Because when you take livestock out of the equation, you're talking about farmers on less than 4 acres, and the difference is whether they're making 2,000 or 5,000. And I'm sure there are some. I don't think it's a lot, but you take a lot of the importance out of that question when you give everyone the right to grow food. Because these are people, we're not talking about livestock now, we're talking about plants. So you already can't be zoned now for growing food. So the importance of having that $2,000 threshold or $5,000 threshold goes away when you're talking about gardening. So it no longer matters. With poultry, there's a little bit more variability because with the proposal, you would be able to have a small backyard poultry flock. So again, that doesn't matter if you have the $2,000 or not. But there are a fair number of people who raise poultry on less than an acre, sell their eggs. So and that's what we got with the ducks in Essex, was that whole issue. So we wouldn't be stopping the small backyard poultry flock, but you might be making a commercial poultry operation on less than an acre, subject to zoning. And then the question is, is that okay? And arguably it is. If you, do you really want 200 chickens in downtown Stowe on a half an acre? That's a legitimate question, but it's a small, I still think it's a small group of people that are impacted by that. And the 2,000 and 5,000 is not a big difference. I think it's a good question for the league. If they had, you know, the other things that are important to them, how much do they care about that?
Did they have that data driven why they picked 10, or did you start trying to pick that in the sky?
They, there was, I think a lot of people felt that $2,000 was was too permissive. If you take away the land, because if you've got 4 acres, the $2,000 doesn't matter. But if you've got a quarter of an acre and people are just trying to make that threshold so the town can't touch them, you know, that's nothing wrong with a person trying to do that, but it's maybe not the type of farming that has been traditionally exempt from zoning. So just like the $2,000 number, you know, there's no magic numbers anywhere here, I don't think. I think the key was trying to only, I think the important thing from my perspective is farming was always evaluated as being commercial or bigger scale, like big enough scale so that you could actually be regulated by us. Because we don't have the capacity to regulate 1/10 of an acre lots in downtown. It's just not what we're designed to do. So that 2,000, 5,000, I know there are folks who are very passionate about it. I think when you deal with the broader issues, it sort of becomes almost irrelevant, but that doesn't mean other people can't disagree with that. But anyway, that was the gap we were trying to fill, was we didn't want to increase eligibility requirements to make farmers not exempt. But we also wanted to make sure that, you know, right now, farmers can be zoned, all farms can be zoned. So, you know, we think it's really important to get away from that. And so if we're nibbling at the margins, we maybe are not thinking about the big picture as much. So anyway, that's the one. The other one was, you know, as we talked about livestock, like with the $2,000 and Schedule F threshold, there was no land-based requirement at all. So the only land-based requirement was, could you comply with the REPs? But again, the REPs really aren't set up for 1/10 of an acre properties. And I've given you the example of the goats that we had downtown living in a basement, 100 Heffernan raised. What's the difference between a pet and livestock? And it's true. There are different ways to regulate this. But I think importantly, like so basically we are trying to go back to where we were with plugging those gaps. Both the league and the farm coalition are asking for more than they have. And that's where I think our proposal is different. We're asking to go back to where we were, except for in areas where everyone agrees it should be different. Growing plants, backyard poultry, and you know, so on. And also right now, we only regulate livestock on 4 acres, unless you're a commercial farm. And so we're proposing shrinking that down to 1 acre, because we think the 4 acres is, you know, maybe too much, because we do want to encourage farming, and the league is okay with that. So the only place that we are asking for more than the farmers had, or more authority that we had, is where there's consensus with the other stakeholders. In contrast, the farm coalition, understandably, but they're asking for more than they had. They're asking to say towns can't regulate livestock at all if the agency determines that there's enough that they can properly manage their waste and nutrients. So the waste and nutrients issue, which we propose from the 1 to 4 acres, that's a fine standard when you have some land. But people can export their waste. So you could arguably have, you know, 5 pigs in your garage, clean out your garage every day, bring it to a manure pit somewhere else, and be properly managing your nutrients and waste, because you're not discharging waste to a neighbor. You're not doing anything necessarily that's violative of the REPs, but we're not set up to regulate pigs in a garage. And that's not, you know, and that's not what we were, that you need it for us to be able to adequately regulate you need some land, because that's what we're looking at. How are you managing your land, and how much land is that, you know, that could be up for discussion. But we really can't effectively regulate pigs in a garage, or, you know, an emu in a shed that's on a quarter of an acre. We're just not set up to do that. And so the question is, do towns get to do it? They have been able to do it. Towns, before the Supreme Court decision, they could regulate all livestock on under 4 acres unless somebody was commercially farming. And they could also regulate livestock on more than 4 acres if the landowner didn't have a certain specified number of animals. So you could have 100 acres and 2 horses. The town, that was subject to zoning by the town. I don't think towns were zoning that, but they could. So the coalition is like using the Supreme Court's decision to ask for more, which is legitimate. But we already agreed, yes, more, everybody should be able to grow food. Yes, more, everybody should be able to have small backyard poultry. But they want to expand that even further to towns can't regulate livestock. The Agency of Agriculture should. And without any minimum land-based requirement. And I don't know what the basis is for taking away the rights towns have had that seem to work pretty well. We haven't had, I'm not aware of big problems with a town allowing a few goats. We want them to. We want towns to allow livestock wherever it's reasonable, but that doesn't mean it's farming that the Agency of Agriculture can adequately regulate in downtowns. We can't be looking at 20 ducks in downtown Burlington. But we'd have to if it's our responsibility. But a town that has a government and we want towns to allow that, but it's just we're trying to not change the status quo. So that's kind of where, like, we're not asking for anything new. We're asking to go back to where we were, but plug some gaps where everybody agrees it's appropriate to do that. And then on the flip side, the league, they've been great. They could have easily come in here and said, we just got the biggest win from the Supreme Court we've had in a long time. It should be about local control. We should be able to regulate farming. Why not? Fortunately, they're not taking that position. I don't know if it would have any support in this building or not.
Maybe we ought to spend a little time on that. I don't want to take away, thought process of the committee. Maybe we ought to just look at the overall picture and say, okay, if we agreed over this for word, we just said, yes, there you go. What is it that the farming community lost by agreeing to this and the Supreme Court decision? What did we lose?
That's a great question. I would say that there are 2 potential people who lose if you adopted the language that's in front of you. It's somebody who's commercially farming livestock on less than an acre. I don't know that have at least 2,000.
Less than an acre.
Less than an acre. Because if you have more than an acre, that could still be us. They wouldn't lose anything. If you went to under an acre and you're commercially farming, this is not pets, this is not the emo in the garage, this is commercially farming livestock on less than an acre, those people could be newly subject to municipal zoning. Because under the old system, if they had $2,000 or Schedule F and they were on less than an acre, that would be us. It's like the ducks in Essex. The duck farmer wouldn't lose because he can have a small poultry, backyard poultry flock under this language. But if you had livestock, if you had pigs on less than an acre and you were commercially farming them, those people could lose under this system. I don't know if those situations exist or not.
Can we put a waiver in that if they're doing good farm practices and are under the allowable under an acre that they could continue? Is there a waiver we can put in that somebody can't start it up, but if you are doing it right now,
You'd already been doing it.
yeah, as of this date,
Grandfather.
I think you
is
could.
it that way, if they're doing best practices and it's, especially if the neighbors aren't, if you've been doing it for years and nobody's complaining and then all of a sudden a new neighbor comes in and takes his satellite view and it's like, oh,
Right.
you got 5.5 acres there.
Yeah.
Then you could go to the zoning board and start an issue and they have to look it up. And if they, or they have to pursue it, and that's what I worry about. And if we can grandfather it, provide good practices, that then they can't be touched.
I think that's possible. We can't recommend that just because we have this agreement with the league that we would stick to it. But I would say that is along the lines of my broader thinking, which is this conversation doesn't have to be over. From our perspective, we are trying to go back to where we were. But, and I've said this to the other stakeholders and will continue to, if I don't know of any situations where that exists, where somebody has pigs on half an acre and they're commercially farming. But if it does, then we weren't regulating it because, but it doesn't mean they wouldn't have the protection. But the towns were apparently allowing it to happen. So part of my thinking is to the farm coalition, if there are farmers in these situations that are having problems, let's start with the town, if it's not us, and say, what can we do? But if towns aren't allowing it, then the legislature could always step in to say, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be under us. It could just be towns must allow, X, which I don't think we're prepared to ask for that now because we don't even know what X is, and we don't know if there's anybody doing this. So I know that's an imperfect solution. I think you could do the grandfather if you wanted to. But that's the other people I would say that other than under an acre of livestock farming are people who are on less than 4 acres and are making less than $5,000. And those people could be distinctly affected, although you're not talking about livestock, so you can grow plants. So those people, I'm not sure they wouldn't be affected in terms of their ability to grow plants. The only place that they might get into trouble is if they want to have an accessory on farm business, because if you have an accessory on farm business, you also get some protection from zoning. You can be regulated but not stopped. But again, that's that group of people on less than 4 acres and they're making not $5,000. And they could still grow plants, whether or not they could sell them through an accessory on farm business and sell other products, that could be up for dispute. So again, you could maybe create that grandfather if you wanted to. Or we could, continue the dialogue. We are aware of a person in Strawberry. I think you all heard about the strawberry farmer up in the northwest part of the state who had pick your own strawberry on 3 acres, if I remember correctly. I think she exceeded the $5,000 threshold, but she was having trouble with a neighbor because she wanted to sell freebies too, which you can do as an accessory on farm business, and the neighbor sued her over that. So but I think she would make that threshold. But if she didn't, if she had less than $2,000, then that could impact somebody like her. But that's it. I mean, everyone else gets more protection. The livestock on 1 acre is protected as opposed to 4. Person growing plants is protected regardless of whether they're commercially farming. Small backyard poultry is protected regardless of whether they're commercially farming. So there are those 2 little subsets that might be vulnerable, but everything else would be going back to every other farmer would be protected at least as much as they were, which right now no one's protected. So that's kind of
So we're splitting some hairs here.
yeah. And in terms of the league, like they're good with this proposal. They like our livestock solution for almost all of the state, but they want to be able to zone farming in tier 1A and tier 1B areas, which are the more densely populated areas. I understand, again, totally understand why they want to, but it's not something they've ever had. That what they're asking to do is to be able to zone farming in areas that are exempt from Act 250 because they're densely populated, because there's this desire tier 1A and B to have growth. But there's no nexus from the historical framework. There's no nexus whatsoever for their request. Act 250 has never regulated farming. Municipalities couldn't regulate farming. So it's just an extra. It's just, they didn't have it, never had it. I'm not aware of any, there's always some problems in some areas, but I'm not aware of any sort of broad-based concern that in tier 1A and tier 1B areas, there was a need for municipal zoning. So, our request to them is we understand where you are. We're very thankful for the agreement, but do you have an example? Why do you need to be able to zone these farms when you've never been able to? And why do these farms in these areas, if they're successful, why do they need extra burdens? Why do they need extra regulation? But again, our kind of feeling with them is we don't even know what the maps are yet. So it's all a bit speculative. But if we get the maps and if there are some problems with farms in those areas, let's talk about it. Maybe we can help with our regulations to address them. And if we can't, maybe we talk about some legislative solutions in those areas. If there are some real public safety risks, if there are some real concerns, let's address them. But we don't need to sort of have this prophylactic measure when we're not even aware of any problem other than just let's get more than we had, they could have come in here and said we want it all. So I'm not, not saying it's not an appropriate request, but if our goal is to go back to where we were and only expand on things that everybody agrees to, then we can, on the margins, maybe we just keep talking to each other. And if there's a problem, we try to fix it.
So. Not to, and please understand, I'm not trying to use your own words.
I want to tear this thing all apart.
Okay.
So don't worry about the word.
You did say that that it was a negligible difference between 2 and 5,000. I think, I don't know, you used the word negligible, but you said that it didn't really matter one way or another. So I guess my position would be, then leave it at 2. If it really doesn't make any difference, let what has stood go back in, add the Schedule F again. And then the acreage is the one to me that trips me up. How about if you said, for those farmers where livestock is involved and it's under an acre and complaint driven, municipalities have the right to go in and regulate that. Everything that doesn't involve livestock, whether it's a half acre or 1,000 acres, that's just talking about plants, is the Agency of Agriculture's jurisdiction. Does that?
That is the last part of what you said is our intent. We only want to change livestock under an acre. So an acre and above could be us as long as it's appropriate, as long as they can manage it.
According to the secretary, yeah.
Yeah, and for other things other than livestock, like it can be under an acre and it could still be us. You just have to meet the threshold, the 5 or the 2 or the Schedule F. I don't, like I said, I really don't think when you address livestock separately, you take that out of the equation because livestock on a quarter of an acre is a different beast.
It is, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
Why would they? So I did this. I had the acreage, but I didn't do it. But I did a Schedule F. My insurance company, and I had different insurance. Yeah, it cost me a little bit more, but I wanted to be able to deduct it and all that stuff. And it all kind of went together. I mean, I had to have the insurance. I had to do the Schedule F and all that stuff. Why wouldn't somebody? What was it? Just throwing it out there, just because you never know. But anyways, why would somebody who was at the $2,000 threshold be doing a Schedule F anyways?
They should be, but the issue for me with the Schedule F is there's really no, as I understand it, you can, if you have any income or expenses from farming, you can file a Schedule F. So I think you can file one for $10 if you want. So it's a potential loophole. The question, and I'm not saying anyone's using it as a loophole, and anybody can file a Schedule F. Nothing about this conversation is going to change whether somebody can file a Schedule F. The question is whether you can be exempt from zoning. So if you buy one chicken and sell it to your neighbor for $10 and you file a Schedule F, does that mean that you are not subject to zoning? I think arguably.
To me, it kind of proves you're farming. I follow the Schedule F.
Well, it does, but I think the league does not want to regulate farming. They've been very clear about that. I think what they're worried about is as everyone is the person who's abusing this threshold to try to skirt requirements. So you're on 1/10 of an acre in the middle of town, you sell one chicken, you file a Schedule F, town can't touch you. That I think is their concern. I don't think that they care about, but they've also agreed, we don't want to regulate small backyard poultry flocks. So that's great. So then it's not the chicken, it's the pig. And, you have a pig in the backyard on 1/10 of an acre and all the neighbors are complaining. You sell the bacon, you slaughter the pig, sell the bacon to a neighbor, file a Schedule F, and now the town can't touch you. That's, I think, what they're concerned about. And I think that's legitimate. People can have different positions, but the reality is we can effectively regulate that pig on 1/10 of an acre. And so if it's causing all kinds of problems, like it does seem like that's a fair issue between the town, the citizens, the landowner, and it's not really the type of farming that necessitates the same treatment throughout the state. Because if we're out there looking after every duck and rabbit, in the state, like we're not going to be able to do what we need to do. It's protect water quality. So, It is a balance, and I don't think the 2,000, 5,000 really makes a difference, but I can't, but part of compromise is,
Yeah, I get it.
and we're gonna, we really appreciate the league is out in here saying, well, why can't we regulate? South Burlington has some interests that are very different from the Agency of Agriculture. So we should be able to regulate farming different in South Burlington than in Derby. And they're not doing that. So to me, the 2,000, 5,000, like wherever that comes out, I think very, very, very few people will be impacted. And maybe some. But if we don't restore the exemption, everybody who's farming in the state could be. So except for towns that don't have something, I guess, but
How many do?
I think I heard the league say 109 don't have zoning, but I could be wrong about that. Yeah. It's, I think it is around half and half, but obviously the type of zoning can vary widely. There's plenty of communities that have zoning that don't want to regulate livestock. In Burlington years ago, there was someone slaughtering livestock in downtown Burlington. So there was some kind of issues about that because the neighbors were seeing it. And so
Yeah, well, it's doing Lennon, like that, they were doing it, they were slaughtering livestock. They were a licensed slaughterhouse, and they had a compost pile. Right, in a neighborhood, they were legal.
well, and that's part of the thing. When you can farm, you could do more. Compost is great, but if you don't have a land-based requirement, and keeping in mind, 4 acres was the standard that we, the agency, thought you could responsibly farm on. We're trying to lower that because we don't want to be that restrictive. But we can't really get in the middle of regulating our downtowns. So, but we're still talking with the parties, we would love to get 100% consensus. I don't know if that's gonna happen or not, but I really don't think we're far apart. But you all need to grapple with this issue.
I'd like this committee by tomorrow, to try to find consensus amongst ourselves, and that doesn't mean that that's where it needs to be, and if we can't, we can't. If we gotta still keep on having conversations, I'm good with that. You guys drive the ship when it comes to that, but I'd like to try to get 1 and 3 as close to being done as what we can. But again, I don't know that we're ready to hammer that out in the room right now. I mean, maybe there's some more conversation we need to have outside with the groups of people or whatever.
Possibly, but Steve's explained it quite well, that there's, I worry about that small, but after you explaining it this well, I'm pretty happy with the language because I want to get it back out there and start protecting farmers that we had. So my consensus is a couple of tweaks, the 2 to 5, if we could figure that out. And if we can protect farmers, I said, we haven't seen it. I just worry once you make the law, then it pops up.
Sure.
I think that before.
That's my consensus.
And with that, I think that, we better get, what the league says about that a little bit as well. I mean, I agree, council, that we are very blessed to have, the leagues, with us on this. I do, it could be a lot worse. It really, really could be. And they've said over and over and over, they said it half a dozen times we don't want to regulate farm. I mean, when they're saying here, and I take them for their word that they want to do. So I just want to be careful about how much we take advantage of somebody's good grace, and that we work with them in good faith. And I think that we are, but also, I mean, how many times do you split the baby? So that is, again, I don't want to appear ungrateful, but we do with what we got to do. So yes.
So oftentimes people will, especially if it's an appropriation issue, ask for more than what they really feel sincerely and honestly in their heart they're going to actually get. And I don't know how close the 3 provisions, because to me, again, there's 3. There's the monetary provision of the 2,000, 5,000. There's the acreage, which it trips me up more than the other 2, and then there's Schedule F. So those are the 3 And maybe the coalition would be willing to compromise on one of those to come closer to what's in the bill. I mean, I'll put my cards on the table. Right now, I feel like the 2000 and the Schedule F are important, and I'm willing to certainly listen to any compromise with regard specifically to livestock farming under an acre. Can I move my position? Yeah, probably. If somebody comes in and talks to me and convinces me of that, but, I don't want to get off that, but section 1, we still have to address the language, where we're basically addressing the Supreme Court.
Well, I was gonna talk to Senator Plunkett,
Okay.
not only about
Did you
that.
send that to?
I just sent it to you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, Steve has sent me language that I'm good with.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to,
So,
so I'm gonna give you the floor, because I
Oh,
wanted to
great.
ask you about that, and then any other language any other proponents of language within what we're doing.
I sent it to your legislative council too, just because I wanted them to be aware, but
to Shulman, yeah,
to both Mike and Bradley. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, it's just a minor tweak just to soften it.
yeah.
yeah, so I'm gonna send it to Linda right now. Are you good with that being?
That's fine. Sorry, I could have sent it to the whole committee. I just.
Nice.
No,
I'm just glad that
He's the only attorney on the.
Yeah,
No,
he is our language guy, and I.
It softens the language, says the same thing.
Okay.
But adding the little bit of history with the 2015 Act, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Because it also sends a signal of this is what we were, this is what you're arguing, this is what we best.
Yeah.
Um,
But this language is not in what we have right now.
Right, yeah, it changes it to misunderstanding from unchecked and unintended consequences. Misconstrued to taking it up.
Sure, you're gonna be fine with that, Senator?
So can I
Yeah,
can I ask Senator Palmer more questions?
Sure, absolutely.
So the 2000 in the Schedule F, are you concerned about livestock on less than an acre and applying to that? Or are you comfortable with like towns having authority on less than an acre over livestock? Are those?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think the municipality does have somewhat of a jurisdictional landscape if whatever's going on that under an acre is really impacting neighbors. Whether it's smell or,
Yeah.
I understand that, and I know I feel that way if I live next to somebody that had 20 pigs on a half an acre. It wouldn't work too well. But I don't want to constrict the ability of anyone to grow food, and I include livestock as growing food. So I don't know where the compromise is, Steve. It's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And could I be convinced to just go with what we have in front of us? Probably. But my immediate reaction, because the coalition did represent, let's be honest, a number of organizations and entities that don't always see the world exactly the same way. So I appreciated that they did come out with these recommendations and suggestions for us. And they carry a lot of weight.
Yeah.
But your agency also carries a lot of weight, and some degree the league does too. They don't come in here often, so
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I was just wondering if there was an opportunity to build further consensus.
Sure.
On that point. And I guess the only thing I would say about that is that towns already had authority under 4 acres, unless someone was commercially farming. So then the question is, how do we draw that line between, raising your own livestock or pets versus farming? I don't think there's a magic answer, but it is asking for quite a bit more than is there.
Yeah.
So how do we, but I would love to be able to build a consensus on that point. And I think maybe if there was a clear requirement for minimum acreage requirement for livestock, maybe the monetary thresholds could be another point of compromise.
Okay.
But I know the league is very concerned about having no authority over livestock anywhere, because that's never been the case.
And that's understandable. It's an added headache for them in a way,
Right.
because they're gonna have to, if they're gonna, rule on it, they're gonna have to get somebody involved, and that takes time and money and everything else.
Yeah, and I think they're worried it will create a lot of conflicts that they used to have some say in, and then they wouldn't, and we wouldn't be much of a backstop. Like, the big smell is not a whole lot we can do about it.
Yeah.
Other than have you manage your waste effectively, but
Right.
if you're right in the middle of town, you don't have it, there's not anything we can do.
That's the old expression, lipstick on a pig.
Yes.
It sounds as if the number of under an acre with livestock is negligible.
When you're talking about commercial farming, I think
Yes.
so. There's probably a lot of people that have a goat.
Yes.
But yeah,
Um. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, the under, so could it be, to Senator Heffernan's, if we grandfather, and have an exemption, and then I just throwing this out there, maybe an inspection every year to make sure that they have, proper waste disposal and things of that nature. That kind of eliminates, the hiring lawyers.
What could be the proof of the grandfather?
it could get tricky. It'd be
Yeah.
easy 3 months down the road, but
Exactly.
it'd be hard.
That's what I'm nervous about, that everybody uses this as the out. Yeah, I was doing this. Didn't you know? And you guys don't know because you weren't
I
there.
don't know.
So where's the, where?
Maybe we-
lawyers you can hire to straighten that.
You want to give your phone number now? So that's what I get nervous about.
Maybe, you have to register by X date. And then if you don't register by that date, you don't.
What's that mechanism? What's in place already that they could register to or whatever? I mean, are you competing on, are you creating a whole nother bureaucracy of something that?
Well, that keeps us in.
Well, there's certainly no, large or medium farms that the
Yeah.
agency isn't aware of.
Sure.
I don't know how many really small ones there are.
We don't
Let's-
either.
Let's give it some real good thought before we go down that path and make sure that's what we want to trip up the bill. I will do whatever the committee wants. I will do whatever you guys decide. That is the way that is, but let's just be thoughtful. Let's be thoughtful about what we do.
I mean, if I may,
Yeah, absolutely, please.
one way I've been thinking about this is if they're already there, then apparently there aren't any problems. So if somebody has 3 goats on a quarter of an acre and that's been happening, we haven't stopped it. The town apparently hasn't stopped it. I'm not,
And I have to go back to that, the league says, we don't want to stop farming.
Right.
And so we're not, just because we passed this, we're not gonna go and change it if it's there already.
now a town might have a regulation that says you can't have livestock
Right.
or you can't have certain kinds of livestock, but that pre-existed. That wouldn't be a change. So I think you never know. There's always the anomaly, but I think if someone currently has livestock on less than an acre, they've been able to do it. So I'm not sure that anything would change about this.
Okay.
Now the one difference, if they're commercial, then they wouldn't be able to do that under the agency of ag. It would have to be with their town. I'm not sure if there's any of those right now or not. But again, if whatever they've been doing, they've apparently been able to do. But if there's anything that, you would like us to explore with the other stakeholders to, happy to do it. We really tried to come to.
Yeah.
What, any changes were only those that were agreed upon. Everything else was trying to get back to where we were with, plugging those gaps that nobody wanted us to go back to right where we were. So
So let me ask this. Because I do want everybody to think about all the positions that we're having or whatever, and I don't think it's anything that great. Once we sit down with Bradley tomorrow and we start putting pen to paper and all that? Is there anything so terrible that was said today that we can't, that's gonna blow anything up?
I don't think so. And I know there's been some trepidation in both bodies about amending the RAPs, which we've talked about. I don't think it's different whether you do it in statute or whether you do the RAPs, but I have drafted some language that would do the same thing. It would just be in statute instead of the RAPs. So it would just say replace and repeal this section of the RAPs and put it right in Title VI, which is the agriculture statute. It's because it was fresh language instead of amending existing language, it's a little bit cleaner on the 1 acre issue. Because that's a little wonky, the 1 to 4, and it was amending existing language. But the whole point is keeping the 4 acres because everyone was happy with that, but lowering that threshold down to 1 as long as there was enough, as long as the person could manage their nutrients and waste.
But just getting some testimony on our RAPs for anybody that's gonna listen and look at this later and all of that stuff. And I think that you and I might have had a discussion about that. We're not looking to change any RAPs. We're not looking to do anything as far as with that. So can you talk about that just for a moment?
Yeah, so a lot of people have mentioned their concern about opening up the RAPs and there's 2 things. One, that's normally done through rulemaking. So that's a whole separate process that we're not talking about. But the other is, I think a lot of people remember amending the RAPs and the statutory changes that went to that, which led to the change of the word, changing the word accepted to required, which led to the Supreme Court opinion, is that there's a lot of consternation over that. And a lot of that was about how heavily are we going to regulate farms? Because the requirements were substantially increased. There's plenty of people around this building who don't think they were increased enough. And so they want them to go, higher still. That's not part of this discussion. It hasn't been. I mean, anybody could make it part of the discussion, but the whole part of this discussion has been what is farming that's exempt from municipal zoning and what can towns zone. It's not about how we should be regulating farms, how strict the requirements should be. That's a whole different discussion that has nothing to do with this. Somebody could use it as an opening, just like they always can. But this is not about, we believe that the onus on farmers and on us is not to increase the existing requirements, but to make sure that everyone's following them. We believe the regulations are adequate. There are some instances where folks aren't following them, and we've got to do a better job with that. But we don't think that farms, we believe farms are regulated more heavily in Vermont than almost anywhere. And we don't think that they need to be more heavily regulated. We think we need to make sure that people are following the rules and that there's assistance with them to be able to do it because it is very expensive to do a lot of the things that we require.
And on that point, Mitty, anybody on the outside, anybody getting such pressure from the outside that if we pass this thing, that's gonna be hard to get through the Senate? Everybody feeling that, you're not getting pressured or anything as far as anything like that, so,
No,
okay.
I did note that Steve said we're still talking with other stakeholders, which it's great. And if someone watches today's testimony and then taps you on the shoulder and say, hey, you know what? It would be great if you could, in the end, come back maybe with somebody that represents a coalition and say, hey, we finally agreed this is what it should be. Because I think that would help some of us to move forward. So
That's really what we wanted to do.
I know.
From the beginning.
I know. Well,
Well,
you did a good job.
well, time is a ticket for anybody that's listening and anybody's here, because we're gonna put some language together tomorrow. We're gonna have to put some language tomorrow that won't be it doesn't have to be the final word, but we're trying to make it the final word for us to get on through sections 1 through 3. So if anybody's listening, great. Let it be known. We'll be in tomorrow at 11. What time? 10:45 with Bradley Shulman. And we're gonna try to get some language down and, anything else that anybody wants to bring out? I think we've had a really, open and, just a great discussion. So anything else that anybody wants to get out? Are you folks good?
Yeah, and I would just say that although we're necessarily focused on the disagreements, because that's what needs to be resolved, the consensus is far broader
Well, I think,
than the disagreements.
I think that to where we are right now compared to where the gut wrenching process was when decision first came out, where that we're, you know, it's not as bad as what everybody was thinking it was gonna be. So, I'm glad to, as Senator Heffernan said, to get some protections back in, and as well are there, and, I'm glad that we have stakeholder agreements. And that it's, just splitting some hairs that we're at right now. But again, we wanna, you know, I think the thing I'm most proud about this committee, and I don't know if it's all right here, but I think the most proudest that I am is that we are willing to look at the smallest thing that's going to impact farming in any way that it is and consider that, so that the small person's voice is being heard. And you know, the big person's voice is being heard as well, that we are willing to consider it all and protect all. And, I'm showing us, yeah, we do a good job of that.
Is the House doing anything in this regard, or is it this, the vehicle?
So they have that, they are, the House Ag Committee released its version last week.
Oh,
And it would make, right to grow food include livestock. So it would basically adopt the coalition's perspective on that point. We haven't had much conversation with House Ag about it. We did before that their language came out. They would not be amending the REPs. They would only be amending statute, but they would create this basically a livestock anywhere, proposal, which the league is very concerned about. And so we're still gonna be talking about that. That's what's kind of prompted this next layer of conversations and why
okay,
we were always open to
good
talk.
to know it.
But I don't know where they're gonna come down on that. When they did talk about it the first time late last week, a few of the representatives voiced some concern about the livestock issue. So I don't think they're anywhere
I
near.
want the league to agree with the language that we put out. I just think it's, I think that's very, very important. I think that if we can't get them nodding their head in the right direction and wholeheartedly support with what we have, then we haven't bargained in good faith.
And we're so close at anyway. It's,
Yeah.
like you said, we're splitting hairs now.
Yeah.
You should. I'm pleased we did come to a conclusion fairly quick.
Well, we really appreciate all your time and attention, and it makes it so much easier when we can have these thoughtful discussions. And we're still more than happy to tweak our recommendation. We just need to do it in concert with the league, since that was,
I think
we didn't want them, you know, we were thankful for where they came.
Yeah.
So where they got to.
Yep.
So, yeah. Exactly.
well, good. Everybody good as far as on that?
Yep.
Okay. I don't really want to start up anything right now. I mean, I want to keep the focus on this right now, unless anybody has any other business that they want to bring up. Rob, you're good with language, right? You said all that, so that's important to us, and it's not something that we can't do. Does anybody else have anything that they want to say? Senator Major, you're good?
No, Patty, good.
I'm good.
All right,
Thanks so much.
let's,
Abby could have told you all the same thing in about a tenth as much time and more persuasively. So.